Good evening and welcome to I-24 News. I'm Emily Francis. It's day 196 of Israel's war against Hamas. But our top story is the world calling for a de-escalation after Israel's reported drone attack on an Iranian airbase in retaliation for Saturday's missile barrage. This, as an ABC News report suggests that it was not a drone attack at all, but instead an Israeli missile attack. Meanwhile, there are various reports claiming different degrees of the attack and the damage, yet Iran saying it was nothing more than 3 small drones launched by unconfirmed agents. I-24 News correspondent Mary McAuliffe has more.
Calls for calm are dominating the diplomatic arena as suspected Israeli strikes on Iran, Syria, and Iraq boomed through the Middle East early Friday morning. In the aftermath, urgent appeals for de-escalation as Israel-Iran tensions continue to soar. Those tensions thrust their way to the front of the agenda for ministers of the G7 as they wrapped up a 3-day summit in Capri.
I immediately wanted there to be a clear message from the entire G7. The political objective of the G7 is called de-escalation. We have been working, we are working, and we will continue to work to be active players for de-escalation in the whole Middle East area.
The Italian foreign minister also revealed that the U.S. was in fact informed of the Israeli strike before it happened, also claiming the group of major powers was responsible for the limited nature of the strike.
I think that what happened was also the result of the work of the G7.
The overnight strikes reportedly targeted an Iranian military airbase near the city of Isfahan, where significant Iranian nuclear sites are located. Iranian officials in state-aligned media has worked to downplay the extent of the strike, saying Iranian air defense intercepted 3 drones and denying reports of a missile attack.
The sound heard early in the morning today in Isfahan was not an explosion. It was our powerful air defense firing at suspicious objects. It caused no damage or incident at all. The air defense and its proud staff are fully prepared to confront any enemy with malicious intentions against Iran's land or sky.
The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed Friday that there was no damage to Iranian nuclear infrastructure. The statement from the IAEA going on to stress that nuclear facilities should never be a target in military conflicts. Within Israel, there's yet to be any official confirmation of the strikes, and one minister is drawing ire both domestically and abroad for an apparent claim of Israeli responsibility and his own initial assessment, calling the attack lame. Both Israel and Iran continue to vow that any and all threats against their respective territories will be dealt with. And last night's attack, though limited in scope, could be just the beginning of a new round of escalation in the Middle East.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that G7 ministers are adopting new sanctions and other measures against Iran in coming days. Here's more from his press conference in Capri, Italy, where G7 ministers are meeting.
The United States has not been involved in any offensive operations. What we're focused on, what the G7 is focused on, and again, it's reflected in our statement and in our conversation, is our work to de-escalate tensions. We're committed to Israel's security. We're also committed to de-escalating, to trying to bring this tension to a close. You saw as well, or you'll see soon in the G7 statement, a commitment to hold Iran to account for its destabilizing activities, holding it to account by degrading its missile and drone capabilities. And yesterday, the United States announced additional sanctions on Iran.
United Airlines announced a few hours ago that they're canceling all flights to and from Israel until May 2nd, this in light of the volatile situation between Israel and Iran. Meanwhile, other airlines like KLM, Swissair, Austrian Airlines, and Lufthansa have canceled flights today to and from Tel Aviv. Flight schedules, of course, have already been disrupted throughout the past week in reaction to Iran's unprecedented drone and missile attack on Israel last Saturday night. We're now joined live in studio by the one and only Dan Perry, international affairs analyst and former Europe and Middle East editor for the Associated Press, among many other qualifications. So let's start with the obvious. Is this the retaliation everyone's been waiting for, and is this the end of this tit for tat between Iran and Israel?
Well, it appears to have been calibrated such as to look like something, while not compelling Iran to have to reply. we don't really know how much damage was done, but it's probably a positive sign that Iran is attempting to diminish it, because if you're preparing a counterstrike, you'll be howling in outrage at what was done to you. Look, I hear Blinken talk about de-escalation, and that's a very laudable notion in the world, but realistically, for the situation to de-escalate with Iran, it requires Iran to end its skullduggeries all over the region. You still have the Houthis messing up global shipping trade. You still have Hezbollah.
First of all, in Tehran, the streets were filled with anti-Israel protesters shouting things like "death to Israel." This after last night's alleged drone strike on Iran. However, the usual silenced voices of Iranian civilians are being heard in the form of graffiti. You can see some of the images on your screen, some in Farsi, some in English, voicing support for the Jewish state to strike at the heart of the Islamic Republic. The one in English, "Hit them, Israel. Iranians are behind you." Another one in Farsi translating to "Strike Israel. We'll do the rest on the streets," alluding to a possible civil uprising. And also earlier today, I spoke to Ali Reza Bakhrainifard, who is an exiled Iranian judo athlete, about the situation in Iran.
So, yeah, firstly, I want to talk about the people who is in the streets. And actually, everybody knows who these people are and how they dress, and with the special beard, and with also actually motorcycle. I think you saw some videos on social media after Iran attack to Israel. So then I want to say that most of them are member of Sepah and Basij, and which they are getting paid for. They get paid for this stuff, and or sometimes they collect the children from the school and bring them to the streets, and most of them are between 14 to 25 years old, which they're really young. And I believe that nobody came to the streets by their own choice. So I believe that the revolution will happen, but even now in this sensitive situation. But actually, Iranians don't care. So of course, Iranian people love the Israelis people. And we don't have, we are not the enemy of the Israeli people, of course. The only thing is, as everybody knows, is the government. But I think now we have a young and knowledgeable generation, and now Islamic Republic is weaker than ever, than 45 years old.
Palestinian media outlets are reporting that Mohammed Jaber, known as Abu Shuja, was killed in the overnight IDF raid in the West Bank's Nur Shams refugee camp. He was the top commander of Islamic Jihad's local wing in Tulkarm and was one of several Palestinian gunmen killed in the operation. However, 4 IDF troops were also wounded during the counter-terror raid. The IDF says troops and border police also detained several wanted Palestinians while also discovering explosive devices. The IDF says that the soldiers were not badly injured. Israeli far-right activist Benzi Gopstein, a close ally to National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, has been targeted in the 3rd round of sanctions imposed by the Biden administration, aimed at clamping down on settler violence in the West Bank. The U.S. State Department said in a statement that, quote, Gopstein is the founder and head of an organization whose members have been involved in acts or threats of violence against Palestinians, often targeting sensitive or volatile areas. Gopstein was convicted in January of incitement to racism. The Biden administration is said to target the most extremist politicians while reportedly holding off for now on sanctions against Itamar Ben-Gvir and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. $1 billion in emergency assistance. The vote is likely to take place tomorrow afternoon, and upon passing, it will then head to a vote on the Senate floor a few days later. And if all goes through, President Biden would sign the bill into law, paving the way for about $4 billion to replenish Iron Dome and David's Sling missile defense systems, $1.2 billion for the Iron Beam defense system to counter short-range rockets and mortar threats. $3.5 billion would be dedicated to the procurement of advanced weapons systems. So we've been talking about this a while. At least it is going to a vote. So with that said, if it does go through, how soon would these things be arriving here?
I think there's not that many delay factors. I mean, the House, Biden's not going to veto it. I think it'll pass. And it reflects something that is oftentimes forgotten, even though, for example, on the Columbia campus, you still have clueless students protesting for Hamas in Gaza. The people of the U.S., by and large, do understand that the war, even if it's gotten pretty ugly, and even if it's currently suffering from a strategic malaise, is justified. There aren't that many things you can do when Hamas attacks you as barbarically as it did on October 7th and then promises to do it again and again.
Needs to leave an empty chair at the table during the Seder meal in memory of those who were murdered and kidnapped and are still in Hamas captivity. Here's more from the president.
There is no doubt that this year's Seder night will be unlike any other Seder night. Those who carry the pain and grief with them all the time are feeling it even more strongly ahead of Passover. For them, there is an empty chair with them every moment of the day, wherever they turn. Let us all embrace the bereaved families, the families of the hostages and the wounded and their families.
All right, so I can't believe that we are still here. We know nothing about the hostages, and we're at Passover. It is still
almost 200
so devastating.
days. 200 days, just about. I would say I can't imagine what they're going through, but unfortunately, I think we can imagine what they're going through. It really is a dramatic situation.
Do you have any reason to believe or hope that a deal could squeak through? I mean, it's very hard to remain hopeful when every time there's a possibility it falls through, and now Qatar is kind of just saying we give up in a way.
Yeah. Well, look, we have for a while been speculating that since Hamas won't release all the hostages and Israel won't pull out, maybe a partial release for a temporary ceasefire, that kind of made sense. Since Hamas doesn't care about the deaths of civilians, Israel doesn't have much leverage. And it turns out that all they want to do is an all-for-all deal. All the hostages, those are alive.